Hello campers, it's the 22nd of March, so fairly intensive week removing the Carnation Phoenix system out of this van. It's all out. The only thing that's left now are about 40% of the cabling, all labelled up. These do lights or go to the various 12 volt sockets. Everything's been buzzed out. There's a few cables there that run the length of the van, which probably can be reused. I've cut a couple of access holes here because there was a massive bird's nest of cabling there, preventing me removing probably 30 or 40 cables, including all the data cables. End result, cables are set, labelled up. A few cables here to be chased out, but they run right over into the far corner behind the aircon unit. He can deal with those later on. Out of all this lot, there may be 10 that he's going to have to buzz out, mainly the ones that go to the door switches, because the door switches in this van are these stainless steel or steel contacts, and you can see they're all rusty, they don't make good contact, and it's not brilliant. He's got 3 wires he's going to have to rerun into the cab, and I'll go into the cab in a minute. 2 wires for the central lock-in, and 1 wire that goes to a relay via that yellow wire that's coiled up there. They run the side lights, or the orange lights, marker lights down the side of the van. I've got the lights at the moment. We've been breaking down the Phoenix harness and pinching the connectors that went into the Phoenix control box, because they make very handy temporary connectors. So they're the wires for the left and right lights. And I've just run it off fuses. We've got one of the leisure batteries connected up temporarily to the existing fuses there. It just provides lighting. All the cables are labelled up according to the labelling convention on the diagram that came in the van. We only found 1 wire, or 2 wires rather, in the entire van that were wrong, or rather this diagram was wrong. All the wires were wrong, doesn't really matter which, but they'd got the scene lights muddled up. The rear scene light was actually the right hand one, and the right hand one was the rear one. So we dropped down the head butt crash pad up there just to gain access to the lighting that went to the blue light circuit, but the end result is there's a good dozen nice cables that run end to end of the van, which will allow him to wire up things at that end. He left some spare wires. There's a grey wire in that hole there coiled up, which went to the reversing camera, and the remnants of it is there. That cable in its entirety is about 60 feet long, so they obviously went a little bit mad with the spare cable. There's some aerial leads which ideally need chopping off, but at the moment we've just presented them through these holes. The inverter works, tested that yesterday. What else? Not much else in here. Let's go out. This locker here originally had dozens and dozens and dozens of wires in it. All we've got now is the remote control lead for the inverter, and a couple of heavy duty 12 volt cables that go to the batteries. Everything else is out. Absolutely everything. It was easier to take everything out than trying to work around the odd 1 or 2 cables that need to be kept. And here we are in the cab. He has yet to clean the floor, but we took the mat out. All the cabling ran where those few remaining cables are. The yellow cables are the airbag ECU cabling. That's a Iveco original part. And what's interesting is we found 2 connectors not plugged in that probably are designed to go to seats if they have seat airbags. And they're obviously coded out, because normally when these connectors are not connected up, they cause airbag warning lights. White wire and grey wire go to the rear speakers in the saloon. We've left those in place. You can have a bit of music while he plays. The red and black wire is an interesting wire. It goes to the Bodybuilder's connector, and it seems to allow some kind of remote engine start, based on how it's wired up. But I haven't made any effort to really work that out, because it's not necessary. What we have got is a harness there, which currently goes through the firewall, and that was the original blue lights and maybe the siren, but that may provide a handy piece of cabling should you want to get any electrical connections under the bonnet, so we're going to tuck that out the way and keep that there for now. These circuits are now isolated. We were doing a bit of investigating yesterday, playing Hunt the Central Locking, which is why all these covers are off. That was the isolator for the Phoenix system. It operated a dirty grate relay, which has been removed because for a camper van it's more sensible to have an on-off switch. So that switch is redundant. That switch originally operated it's a parallel switch. The idea was it would connect the leisure batteries to the chassis battery. The circuit's still there, the cable's coiled up over there. The actual relay that operated it is just in that black box there. This button here is an Iveco part, as best we can tell out. Certainly the wiring is Iveco wiring. This is a chassis battery isolator. And then there's the standard Iveco air suspension system. And we found the retarder, this van has got a retarder, and the retarder ECU is actually in that little glove box there, hence the butchered screws everywhere. They've actually put the ECU in there. We've bunged the Phoenix control panel back in just to fill a hole, really. Did we work out what that red button there did? Well, I hazarded a guess, didn't I? I think I had an idea. Well, anyway, all this is now disconnected. Everything's gone. What we've got in this corner here is a whole bunch of wires that still go up the door pillar. Again, this is a nice handy. It looks like they all run up into the overhead centre console, or a lot of them do. That's a nice handy amount of spare wires. 2 of them you will need to use for the central locking, because originally the central locking wiring went down there, up there, and through these conduits. He's going to put a walk through in this van. You don't really want cabling under the floor we're going to have a walk through. So seeing as there's already a nice cable harness that goes all the way up the B pillar, and along there, he can drop those wires down to the connection behind here, where we think they spurred off into the central lock-in. There's also there's a video cable there which goes to that camera, and amazingly it hasn't been butchered, so you could use that. There's there's two leads for microphones. There's a microphone there, and there's one there. And obviously, if Trace takes down the headliner and everything else, he can deal with a lot of this. And then there's some aerial cables. One thing that's interesting, it looks like the radio aerial, waving the camera around, the radio aerial is terminated underneath this speaker here, and it actually goes through there. The radio aerial appears to be in the door somewhere. Reception's pretty crap, but I could only get Radio 1 on it yesterday, but the radio does work. I'll just nip over there and talk about, well, before I do, the battery charger works. It's it provides, it charges up 3 circuits, and the mains isolator works. Unfortunately, that is a 240 volt rated mains isolator. I think I mentioned earlier on, it ought really to be replaced with a proper consumer unit, but he has effectively got a 16 amp fuse and a breaker there, so it's adequate. And obviously the battery charger is dual voltage, so we've tested that and it all works. In this hole where the glove box is, this is on this Iveco van, this blue socket and this blue socket here, they are the Bodybuilder's interfaces. There was one wire on this one, and it provided the speed signal, and there was a UDS accident recorder module bolted under the seat over there, which took data from this and various other positions of the van. That's all come out. So this socket is now unused. This one, it only now has one wire left in it. It's got a fuse on it. And this, if I understand the Bodybuilder document correctly, allows the engine, providing the keys turn ignition, to be remotely started. I'm not quite sure what sequence of events would have done that. There's a whole range of timers and relays in here, in this box here, that are connected to this wire. I got a feeling when the ignition's on, without the engine running, if the batteries get too low, I think the electronics in this box here can start the engine to get the alternator going. I think that's what it does. But that was effectively the only wire out of all this lot that was coming back here that we needed to keep. The rest of this stuff, you've got things like there's a signal on there that tells the reverse is engaged. There's another one there that tells it the handbrake on. but this all matches up with the information in the Bodybuilder interface. We just left the cables, you know, I've just chopped them off and put some heat shrink on there, just in case he wants to use any of this information. But in the Sprinters, I actually put a CAN bus interface in, and that's bolted under the driver's seat. This is an unusual place to put it, because it does mean you've got to do it's an awkward thing to get to. It would have been better, I think, under the seats. So that was an interesting exercise in working out what that does. I love the way these converters use tape for everything. It's a right bodge out how they taped everything up. It's messy, it looks messy, but when you actually take the tape off, often there are decent proper joints under there, but it does look messy. So now we have the remaining bird's nest. Battery charger, 3 outputs into 3 fuses, chassis battery, and 2 auxiliary battery circuits. There's actually 3 auxiliary battery circuits in here, but one of them's in parallel. They've paralleled up the tail lift batteries effectively, and although it's a separate battery bank, it's paralleled up with the auxiliary batteries, and I think the tail lift batteries are just closer to the tail lift proximity. So this box here contains 2 timers and a relay. The first timer relay simply waits until the alternator voltage comes up to a specific voltage and then switches on this box here. And this box here is designed to improve, it's probably the best way of describing it, it's a battery management device. The way that an alternator charges, it actually controls, and we had some fun and games with this box controls the regulation of the alternator. It can actually make the alternator provide more voltage, so it can overcome volt drop in the cables to the batteries at the back, and it can also push the voltage up so you get a better bulk charge into the batteries. But it's not rocket science compared to modern B2B. You've got to bear in mind this van is now 12 years old, so the design is probably 14 years old. But the combination of this unit here managing the alternator and this Victron battery isolator provide the split charging in this van. And I was having all sorts of problems with this. I couldn't quite understand how they wired it, because that is the input pin. I expected to see 12 volts on there permanently from the chassis battery. What we actually had was nothing on it at all, or about 2 volts. 12 volts on that one, 12 volts on that one, 12 volts on that one, assuming the auxiliary batteries were connected. This connection here goes to the chassis battery. What they've actually done is, normally an alternator, the 12 volt output from an alternator goes directly to the chassis battery via a fuse. In this van, the alternator is connected to this, and this Victron unit then does split charging to the chassis battery as well as to the leisure battery system as well. That confused the hell out of me for a while, because all the wiring disappears under the van in black conduit. I'd need to get the van up on a ramp to actually follow them all, and I was also struggling to understand what this relay here is doing and what's going on. But they can effectively bleed voltage off into this if necessary. It was confusing me, A, because it didn't make sense that this didn't have 12 volts on it, and B, because when we started the vehicle up on Friday, the alternator wasn't producing any voltage at all. And yesterday I was looking at this, because we haven't touched anything here other than just examine it. Hadn't touched this at all. The only wire that did anything was the red and black one over there, coming from this thing over here. And I was really confused why the alternator wasn't working. So after a lot of buzzing things out yesterday, I finally twigged it was missing the ground. And the ground wire for all this electronics here and all the alternator, all the control over the alternator, there's a little black wire there. Ignore that lot. We haven't worked out that goes under the van as well. He needs to trace that, but that black wire wasn't connected. That is the ground wire for this lot. It goes all the way up the door pillar, up, down there, down there. It goes to an earth point there. And we'd removed dozens of earth cables from here and hadn't reconnected that one cable. It's the last cable that we needed to follow through. And we hadn't followed it through and checked it. There it is there. That's it. That's a pretty nutty way of doing something. Cabling should be local. There's plenty of earthing points here. I mean, this Victron unit is earth there. on one of the seat bolts. Why they didn't earth it locally so it was bloody obvious it was an earth lead, I do not know. But they'd taken it back to a central earth point. Once I connected that up, everything burst into life. And that actually goes against what the manufacturer of this advert unit seems to say in the documentation. The idea is, if you're having problems with this, if this fails, you just unplug it and everything should work. Well, it doesn't. Not in this van anyway. It can't. Because there's nothing that tells the alternator to turn on. What Trace needs to do when he gets underneath the van is down here, there's this lead here, disappears under the floor, and they're all in black cables. It's all filthy dirty under there, I can't see it. But there are 3 wires that go down there. One is a green control wire from this unit here, which I know is controlling the alternator regulation. But there's a yellow and white wire that go down there as well. I have no idea where they're going. The alternator's probably got an external regulator somewhere, which he needs to track down. But that was it. That was annoying me, that. I don't like things that don't work. And I was struggling to understand what was going on. But as soon as I earthed it, everything kicked into life. The relays and control units in there, we've got little LEDs and bits and pieces on there, all burst into life. The Victron thing lit up, and I thought, bingo. What have we got there? Oh, there's one little fuse box there. We weren't sure whether this cable here, this red one, was an input or an output to something. It turns out this is an output. It actually comes back via... They go a bit mad with the cabling. White, brown, red. and there's a choke there as well, or a diode. It's probably a diode. But that's taking an output from when the alternator's working. There's a 12-volt output on that fuse there. Can't remember where it went. I think it went up to a bunch of relays that were... There were dozens and dozens... Well, not dozens. There was 5 or 6 relays behind the dash. Operating speakers for door open warnings and things like that. Which he didn't want. He wanted everything else in the van. What else is left? What I haven't talked about? Oh, there's a black wire there. That black wire there goes to that little gadget on the dashboard. That's a reverse beeper distance indicator. So that's literally out of originally 40 cables, maybe 50 cables here. 4 engine remote start, 2 for speakers, reverse sensors. If I was Trace, I would lose all of these. I don't think this is even necessary, this one, but he can play with it. Now that we've got this spare cable harness going up the pillar and down there, I'd be inclined to reroute those speaker cables, assuming he even wants to run speakers in the back of the van. I'd be inclined to reroute that, and maybe if there's enough spare cable there, reroute the sensor as well, and get everything off the floor completely, so that he's not treading on stuff. That lot can get repositioned slightly. Now, he's going to cut a hole for a window, for a doorway. That black conduit over there, going through the van, that's the level of the floor in the van itself. So his floor is about there. Where's my finger gone? In the van, actually in the saloon. Whether he chooses to cut through this reinforcement beam, I don't know. But it would be quite easy to actually brace something else if he wanted to. If he wants to put a brace up there, it's not going to be difficult. But anyway, that's a quick overview. Best side of a week's work between the two of us. Well, Trace came down and stayed on my drive for a few days. But best side of a week's work, mainly in carefully identifying. We've actually tested every single wire that we've disconnected to work out as best we can what they do. And so I think I said just now there's about a dozen which we don't know what they do, either because they've been chopped off or because he needs to buzz them out after revealing where they go. For example, we haven't got a clue yet, still haven't found the wires that operate those lights up there, assuming they've even got wires to them. We don't know, but there's 4 little orange positioning lights there. You'd expect them to have been wired up in conjunction with the ones on the side of the van here, but we know which ones these are wired up to because we found the wires for that. But he needs to... Oh, sunlight. He's going to have to pull those out, have a look at the colour of the wires, try to verify that the sods haven't changed the colour 6 inches further down the thing, and then trace them back. But that'll be a lot easier now that he's only having to deal with maybe 10, 15 wires rather than 100 of them. But there you go. Quick overview of my efforts to tackle the Phoenix system. Thanks for watching.